이거는 지금 라디오 존대 수신 시스템입니다. 그러니까 라디오 존대가 하늘을 올라가면서 전파를 쏘는데 그거를 안테나와 이 프리앰프 그리고 저기 안에 있는 수신기를 통해서 데이터를 수집하는 장치입니다.
Meanwhile, researchers working inside are busy installing equipment for the experiment. There is a reason everything is done meticulously today. It is the first time the team will fly a radiosonde with a quartz oscillator that can measure stratospheric humidity with high precision.
성층권의 수분량 0에서 10ppm까지 아주 미량이 있는 그 수분의 함량을 고도에 따라서 정밀하게 측정한 것이 이번 실험의 목표라고 하겠습니다.
Even slight changes in the amount of moisture can affect the atmosphere and the air we breathe according to the atmospheric flow. Today's experiment is very important because small amounts of moisture can have an impact on Earth's climate change in the long run. Before the experiment, the researchers checked whether the radiosonde sensor can send signals properly.
여기 12개 GPS 수신되고
지금 저희가 이 들어오는 신호에서 지금 체크하고 있는 것은 GPS에서 잡히고 있는 위성의 개수입니다. 여기 그 숫자 12가 GPS에서 잡힌 위성의 개수. 그래서 GPS가 잘 작동되도록 이 프로그램을 짜서 잘 들어오고 있구나. 이걸 이제 확인하는 그런 화면이라고 볼 수 있습니다.
Now that the signals are working well, it's time to get the balloon ready to take the radiosonde up to the sky.
이 안에 이제 헬륨을 가득 채워서 라디오 존대를 비행하기 위한 일정 부력을 만들어줄 예정입니다.
A balloon filled with helium can lift weight of up to 800 grams.
그래요? 어때? 지금 부력 상태?
현재 부력으로는 존대 비행하기에는 충분한 것으로 생각됩니다.
가자.
Despite technological advancements, balloons are still used for meteorological observations because they go up slowly, enabling them to record atmospheric conditions in minute detail. That's why radiosondes are used worldwide to this day to observe the upper air.
야, 오늘은 날이 맑아가지고 잘 되겠다. 잘 날아가고 있어. 한 30km 막 올라갈 것 같은데?
From developing the world's first upper air simulator to a high-performance radiosonde, Dr. Kim strives to boost the credibility of meteorological observation in Korea. But he has more goals to achieve.
제 목표는 저희 기상 모사 시스템이 국제적으로 활용이 되고 그리고 제가 만든 라디오 존대가 연구 분야에 있어서 기준기로 그러니까 매일 쓰는 그런 일상적인 것이 아닌 기준기로 활용되는 것이 제 마지막 남은 목표입니다.
Dr. Kim Yong-gyu has set international guidelines by targeting a niche market in standards research that received little attention despite its importance. He says that the best methods to reach the finish line first are that of perseverance, endeavors, and enjoyment.
제 연구신념은 싸고 좋은 물건을 만든 사람이 공학자이다입니다. 비싸게 좋은 물건을 만들 수 있으나 그거는 많은 사람들이 쓰지 못합니다. 공학은 많은 사람들이 널리 쓸 수 있게 하는 학문이기 때문에 가급적이면은 싼 재료로 성능은 좋게 하는 것이 맞다고 봅니다. 그래서 전 지금까지 이러한 생각하에 항상 새로운 것을 개발하고 노력해 왔습니다.
제주특별자치도가 6차 4.3 희생자 보상금 신청을 2025년 1월 2일부터 2026년 12월 31일까지 받습니다. 신청 대상은 본인 및 민법상 상속권자가 가능하며 제주도 내 읍면동 주민센터로 방문 접수 혹은 도청 4.3 지원과 보상팀으로 우편 접수하시면 됩니다. 또한 4.3위원회 심의 결정 이후 보상금 결정서를 통지받으신 분들은 청구 서류를 제출하시면 됩니다. 자세한 사항은 제주도청 064-710-8450으로 문의하시거나 4.3 종합정보시스템 홈페이지에서 확인하세요.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스, 덤프트럭, 낮과 밤이 없이 몸이 부서지도록 일을 했죠. 그러다 보니까 몸이 많이 망가졌어요. 허리 협착증도 생겼고 무릎도 아프고 이제는 내 삶이 다 됐는갑다 생각을 하고 사는 것도 싫고 완전 좌절을 했죠.
지팡이를 짚고 다니실 만큼 근력이 약해지셔가지고 너무 힘들었는데 우연찮게 실버 태권도라는 거를 알게 되셨어요.
다리도 안 올라갔거든요, 솔직히. 근데 64세부터 태권도를 해서 7년째 하고 있습니다.
인상도 너무 밝아지셨고 빨리 가고 싶다고 하시고 도복을 보면서 흐뭇해 하시더라고요. 그때부터 어머니의 삶이 다시 시작이 된 것 같고 지팡이를 안 짚기 시작하셨어요. 그게 진짜 놀라운 변화인 것 같습니다.
어르신들이 운동을 통해서 노년을 건강한 생활을 할 수 있게끔 도와주는 게 바로 저는 태권도라고 생각이 듭니다.
Not only did Mother experience this change, but her fellow teammates also felt reborn due to the dramatic change in their lives.
너무 좋아요. 온 세상을 다 얻은 것 같죠. 제가 태권도 전도사가 된 것 같아요.
열정이 높으신 분이죠. 그 가족 전체가 태권도 가족입니다. 아주 화목하고 건강이 넘치는 대한민국의 대표적인 태권도 가족이 아닌가 싶습니다.
We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
While the Constitutional Court starts discussions on the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol, the president's legal team says Yoon does not agree with the insurrection charges being brought against him. The U.S. Federal Reserve has lowered its benchmark key rate for the third straight time. Markets fell big following the announcement, as they expect fewer rate cuts next year. The National Intelligence Service has confirmed that at least 100 North Korean troops have been killed in Russia during combat with Ukrainian forces. It's December 19th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. The Constitutional Court says the president is rendering difficult the process of serving legal documents by refusing to accept them. Meantime, President Yoon firmly rejects the idea of insurrection and arrest orders. Our Pei-Yun-ji leads our coverage.
The Constitutional Court, which has started to discuss the early stages of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial, said Thursday that it has again failed to deliver legal documents to Yoon's residence as the president refuses to accept them. This is the third time that the president has refused to receive documents related to his impeachment trial. The Constitutional Court has been repeatedly sending such documents to both the presidential office and Yoon's residence, but all have gone undelivered. The court said Thursday that if President Yoon continues to refuse to accept these documents, it will announce its position on Monday on whether the president's action should be regarded as deemed delivery. Meanwhile, Seok Dong-hyun, a lawyer for President Yoon and his longtime friend, said Yoon never ordered anyone to be arrested on the night of the martial law.
The president himself is also a lawyer. From what I've heard, he never used terms such as arrest or drag someone out.
His remarks come after military and intelligence officials have said President Yoon gave orders to arrest lawmakers, including prominent political figures, such as the ruling party leader Han Dong-un and the main opposition party leader Lee Jae-myung. According to the National Intelligence Service Deputy Director, Yoon reportedly said they must use this chance to arrest them and wipe them out when martial law was imposed. In a separate briefing earlier in the day, President Yoon's attorney also told reporters that Yoon never considered or agreed with the idea of insurrection.
As a president, he has neither considered nor agreed with the crime of insurrection. Since he has never had such thoughts, it will be regarded that he does not agree with those thoughts.
Seok also said Yoon is willing to represent himself in legal proceedings related to his brief imposition of martial law. He added that although Yoon remains apologetic for declaring martial law on December 3rd, he has a clear and confident position on the issues. After President Yoon was suspended from his duties following the Parliament's vote last Saturday, all eyes are now on whether the Constitutional Court will remove him from office or restore his presidential powers. Pei-Yun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the prosecution has begun search and seizure procedures at a specialized police unit and the Defense Ministry's Investigation Bureau over the martial law incident, which could trigger a fresh feud among the three investigation bodies. Our An Sung-jin explains.
The prosecution special investigative team has begun a search and seizure procedure on the National Police Agency's National Office of Investigation, with a particular focus on the Investigation Planning and Coordination Division. On Thursday, the prosecution office confiscated the telephone of Woo Jong-soo, the head of the National Office of Investigation. This comes as prosecutors partially forewent their investigation into the declaration of martial law, handing over the investigation into President Yoon Suk-yeol and former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min to the Corrupt Investigation Office on Wednesday. The National Office of Investigation is currently under allegations that it deployed homicide detectives to arrest key political figures on December 3rd, following orders from the Defense Counterintelligence Command. The police have admitted that they received a call asking for officers who could control what was described as the chaotic situation in Yeouido. Though they said that they provided a list of detectives, it is unclear whether these officers were dispatched to the scene. The National Office of Investigation is the organization currently investigating the president. Experts suggest that this move may just be a legal obligation.
Though there are multiple stakeholders involved, for public institutions, it is important that they carry out their legal authority, which may, in this case, involve an investigation.
What these prosecutors are looking into may not be the current team that is investigating the president. They're investigating the team that may have deployed those detectives during the martial law declaration. So there would be no problem on the surface, as it would be the prosecutor's authority to look into these allegations.
In addition to the police, prosecutors are also investigating the Defense Ministry's Investigation Bureau and the Seoul Yeongdeungpo Police Station. The Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials has also been investigating the head of the Seoul Yeongdeungpo Police Station, questioning him regarding the deployment of detectives. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Some 24 officials and presidential aides failed to show up at opposition-arranged parliamentary hearings slated for this Thursday, citing state affairs. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo has more.
All 22 key government officials include aides to President Yoon, who were requested to appear at the National Assembly on Thursday to answer lawmakers' questions about the December 3rd declaration of martial law, chose not to show up.
Our committee intended to check the facts regarding the current serious situation by requesting the attendance and asking questions of officials, including the Chief of Staff to the President, the National Security Advisor, the Director of National Policy, and the Chief of the Presidential Security Service. But none of them are in attendance. I cannot but deplore the behavior of the presidential office.
The House Steering Committee, which was boycotted by the ruling People Power Party members, rescheduled the questioning to December 30th. The absentee officials were once again notified that they should appear on that day. Lawmaker Park Kyung-soo, the PPP chief deputy floor leader, told reporters on Thursday that the ruling party and the presidential office have decided not to participate in a session unilaterally scheduled by the Democratic Party. He added that the presidential office is currently busy reporting to acting President Han Duck-soo, and therefore officials there were unable to attend the session. This, as National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik held a press conference with foreign correspondents and reiterated the Assembly's determination to facilitate the procedure of the impeachment trial of President Yoon and have democracy fully restored in the country, thanks to the South Korean people who support them.
The source of the resilience of South Korea's democracy is these people. And this is why South Korea is strong.
Speaker Woo also shared that he sent letters to parliamentary leaders following the emergency at the Assembly earlier this month and said he will continue to make efforts to enhance parliamentary diplomacy. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Acting President Han Duck-soo has vetoed 6 disputed bills unilaterally passed by opposition lawmakers last month. While the opposition has criticized the move, the stakes will be even higher for 2 other bills to launch special probes on President Yoon and his wife Kim Gun-hee. Oh Soo-young reports.
Acting President Han Duck-soo decided to veto 6 contentious bills forced through by the opposition party, but with a heavy heart as the government seeks closer cooperation with Parliament. This came at a special cabinet meeting on Thursday called by the interim leader, who exercised his right to request a reconsideration of bills passed at the National Assembly in November, having assumed executive powers while President Yoon Suk-yeol faces impeachment proceedings. The bills include the opposition Democratic Party's measures to stabilize prices of rice, agricultural and fishery products, and revise legislative powers. Explaining his decision, Han said mandatory rice purchases by the government would not stabilize prices, but only worsen excess supply and lead to a decline in prices. Meanwhile, overcompensating agricultural and fisheries production beyond disaster relief could lead to moral hazard. He also said the revisions to the National Assembly Act could hinder the smooth execution of the budget, while adjustments to the Act on testimonies and appraisals could violate individual freedoms. Han said his decision was made after much contemplation, as cooperation between the government and the ruling and opposition parties is more critical than ever. The opposition expressed discontent over the veto. Floor leader Park Chan-dae accused Han of disregarding public sentiment, warning if he abuses his veto power, he would face the consequences. However, the opposition is putting more emphasis on 2 particular bills it railroaded through last week. A bill to launch a special counsel investigation into First Lady Kim Gun-hee's alleged misconduct, and a bill seeking a special counsel probe into President Yoon Suk-yeol over his imposition of martial law. The DP has also been ramping up pressure on Han to fill up the 3 vacancies at the Constitutional Court to make up a full 9-member panel. 6 votes are required to impeach President Yoon, which as of now would require a unanimous decision. The acting president has to tread carefully as he aims to promote cooperation with the majority-holding opposition, which has threatened to seek Han's impeachment as well. He has before January 1st to decide whether or not to veto the special counsel bills. 오수영, Arirang News.
The brief imposition of martial law has triggered concerns over increasing volatility in the financial markets, prompting various efforts to maintain investor confidence. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin joins us here to take a closer look at the economic implications. Soo-jin, first, how are the markets faring?
Right, so following the passing of the second impeachment vote, South Korea's financial markets have shown signs that they've entered stable territory. So previously, a sharp drop was seen in domestic stock markets in the days after President Yoon's unexpected declaration of martial law and its swift reversal. But this Monday, after the second impeachment vote on Saturday, the Kospi opened up, moving past the 2,500 mark and continued climbing before gradually stabilizing. Although it closed down on Monday, on Wednesday, the benchmark index closed up more than 1% thanks to foreign investors turning to net buyers for the first time since the initial impeachment attempt. Here's how one expert is evaluating the stock market.
When it comes to the stock market, as long as it doesn't drop significantly beyond the 2,500-point range, a certain level of stability can be maintained.
The Korean currency, however, has been slightly more volatile, closing past the 1,410 to the dollar mark the day after the brief imposition of martial law. And it surpassed the 1,430 mark after the first failed impeachment attempt and has remained in that range even after the second impeachment motion passed. However, according to the expert, the fluctuations in the exchange rate are not severe enough to warrant extreme concern.
The Korean won has weakened to around 1,400 against the US dollar, which is around what it was during the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 global financial crisis. But the factors behind are different, so as long as it doesn't surpass the 1,450 mark, you can say it's stable.
He also emphasized the importance of the government's role in building confidence in the country's economic system.
And how has the government been reassuring foreign and domestic investors?
So he's been working full-time to make sure that the political turmoil doesn't impact the economy. So what the finance ministry has done is that it has convened numerous meetings during the past couple of weeks with related institutions and kind of showed that they are committed to economic stability and growth. And just like the expert said, building credibility has been key. Let's take a listen to what Choi Sang-mok, South Korea's finance minister, said during a rare joint press conference for foreign media held on Wednesday.
Given ongoing market volatility due to domestic and external uncertainties, the government will work with all sectors to stabilize the economy, prioritizing external credibility.
To do so, the government will continue to operate a 24-hour monitoring system for financial markets and boost incentives for foreign investments. He also said that the finance and foreign ministries will continue to work closely and regularly hold joint meetings to not only develop comprehensive economic strategies, but also to ensure a coordinated response to economic challenges. The government will also move to include the private sector in ministerial-level meetings aimed at enhancing industrial competitiveness. And lastly, the government will ensure that the 2025 budget will be executed starting the first day of the new year, and that supplementary budget will also be devised for vulnerable groups to further stabilize people's livelihoods.
And what's being done to target market fluctuations?
Right, so this is actually really important because when we look at the overall trend, we can tell that the stock and currency shows that the market turbulence has somewhat eased, but uncertainties do remain. With the Korean won falling to its lowest level since the 2008 global financial crisis following the Fed's interest rate cut decision, the central bank and the Ministry of Finance announced that the upper limit of foreign exchange swap line, which is basically the amount that the National Pension Service can borrow from the Bank of Korea's foreign exchange reserves for overseas investment, has been expanded to $65 billion from the current $50 billion. And here's what else could be effective, according to another expert.
I really urge the Bank of Korea should not only supply the money, but also they should reduce the interest rate. All other countries they try to reduce the interest rate and foster the growth rate of the GDP growth rate in the economy.
Our economic correspondent, Lee Soo-jin, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has lowered its benchmark interest rate for the third time in a row, while forecasting a more cautious approach next year. Our Moon Hae-ryun covers the latest cut and how markets have reacted.
The Fed has cut rates once again despite slower than expected progress made on inflation in the United States. On Wednesday, local time, following the last Federal Open Market Committee meeting of the year, Fed policymakers slashed the benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, bringing it down to the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The latest action brings the total cut made since September to 1 full percentage point and comes despite inflation continuing to remain stubbornly above the Fed's 2% target. The U.S. Consumer Price Index jumped 2.7% in November compared to the same month last year, showing an upward trend to the year-on-year jumps in the index.
We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment.
Fed officials also made some adjustments to their forecasts for next year, projecting a slower pace of rate cuts compared to its September forecast, as well as persisting inflation. By the end of 2025, they see 2 rate deductions of 25 basis points each, which is half a percentage point less than what they anticipated 3 months ago. Inflation forecasts also jumped from 2.1% to 2.5%. These are the first projections since Donald Trump was elected the next president of the United States, and Powell remarked that it is premature to make any conclusions on how possible tariffs could affect consumer inflation. Following the Fed's decision, Wall Street tumbled with the Dow Jones falling for the 10th day straight to mark its longest downward slope since 1974. The tech-heavy Nasdaq and benchmark S&P 500 also tallied their largest drops in months. South Korean stocks and currency also fell, with the won surpassing the 1,450 to the dollar mark for the first time since the financial crisis of 2009. The Kospi closed 1.95% lower at 2,435.93, while the Kosdaq closed 1.89% down. This latest decision from the Fed brings the interest rate gap between South Korea and the US back down to 1.5 percentage points, after it widened to 1.75 percentage points in September. Finance authorities, including the country's finance minister and the Bank of Korea's governor, held a meeting on Thursday morning to discuss these developments and the domestic economic situation. The finance ministries and central banks said they would continue to operate an around-the-clock system to monitor the foreign exchange market and pledge to do their best to stabilize financial markets. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The country's intelligence agency confirms that at least 100 North Korean troops dispatched to Russia to fight against Ukraine have been killed. It cited an unfamiliar environment as one of the reasons behind a high number of casualties. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
At least 100 North Korean troops dispatched to Russia for combat in Ukraine have been killed and almost 1,000 injured. Such a report was made by South Korea's National Intelligence Service on Thursday during a closed-door briefing to the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee. It is estimated that 11,000 North Korean soldiers have been deployed to the Kursk region, the largest battlefield with Russia pushing to reclaim its territory before possible peace negotiations. As for the reason behind the high number of casualties despite the limited number of battles, the agency cited North Korean troops being used as frontline stormtroopers in unfamiliar open terrain and their lack of capability to respond to drone attacks. Reportedly, there are even complaints within the Russian military, saying North Korean forces have become more of a burden due to their ignorance of drones. The agency also noted the possibility of additional troop deployments.
There are rumors within Storm Brigade of further troop deployments, and signs of Kim Jong-un's participation in training have been detected. So we are closely monitoring the possibility of additional North Korean troop deployments, while expecting Russia's modernizing of North Korea's conventional weapons in exchange.
Meanwhile, North Korea is maintaining a low-key approach regarding the South. Pyongyang appears to be preventing military clashes along the front lines, such as the Northern Limit Line and Military Demarcation Line, while tightening domestic control in preparation for the year-end Workers' Party Central Committee plenary session. When it comes to Seoul's political turmoil, the regime is delivering only facts through state-run media.
Firstly, it is being indifferent to the South based on its hostile two-state policy. And secondly, it is avoiding comments considering Seoul's domestic political situation is favorable to them.
Concerns that exposure to South Korea's democratic system could create internal challenges in maintaining control over its regime was cited as one of the reasons why North Korea has refrained from commenting. 김보경, Arirang News.
The U.S. Senate has approved a critical defense policy bill for next year that includes intentions to maintain the current size of U.S. military presence in South Korea. Our Lee Seung-jae covers the significance of this approval.
The U.S. Senate on Wednesday passed the National Defense Authorization Act for the 2025 fiscal year with 85 votes in favor and 14 against. The bill, worth $895.2 billion, also includes provisions to maintain the current level of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. According to the NDAA, the budget allows for the maintaining of approximately 28,500 U.S. Forces Korea troops, strengthening the mutual defense industrial base and reaffirming extended deterrence commitment, utilizing all U.S. defense capabilities. The Pentagon was also ordered to report on plans to strengthen the U.S. extended deterrence commitment to South Korea and ways to advance defense cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The passage of the budget bill also comes almost a month before President-elect Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office. Trump has previously threatened to pull U.S. troops out of South Korea and has demanded that Seoul increases its contribution to the cost of stationing USFK troops. Meanwhile, top Democrats and Republicans at the U.S. Congress reached an agreement on Wednesday on a continuing resolution preventing a possible government shutdown just before the start of the new U.S. administration. The bill allows for the federal agencies to be funded through March 14th. The stopgap measure would keep the roughly $6.2 trillion federal budget running at its current level and also includes a $100.4 billion package in new emergency funding to help states like North Carolina and Florida recover from recent natural disasters. While the vote is likely to pass, should lawmakers fail to act in time, the government would enter a partial shutdown beginning on Saturday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
This morning, Seoul plunged to minus 6.7 degrees Celsius, which is the lowest temperature this winter so far. However, the temperature rose to 5 degrees under clear skies during the day. Please take good care of your health under these sudden temperature changes. With a cold wave advisory in place in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and some areas in Gangwon-do province, the lowest temperatures this winter so far were observed in various parts of western regions. However, this cold spell will slow down a bit until Saturday morning, which is Dongji on the lunar calendar. Tomorrow, Seoul, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at -2 degrees, Gyeongju -4. Highs will move up to 4 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju 8 degrees. Meanwhile, starting with the western parts of the country tomorrow afternoon, snow is forecast in most parts of the country on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
저희 크래비티가 또 ASC에 나올 거기 때문에 다음에도 재밌는 시간 함께 즐겨요.
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President Yoon South Korea's economy will grow. The central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged.
mission complete for rocket booty selfish. Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030.
아리랑. 요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. The U.S. Federal Reserve cut its benchmark interest rate by a quarter percentage point on Wednesday, bringing it to a range of 4.25 to 4.5%. In a policy statement, the Fed said economic activity continues to expand solidly. It says labor market conditions have eased, while unemployment has risen slightly but still remains low. Now, regarding inflation, the Fed acknowledged progress towards its 2% target, but stated that inflation remains somewhat elevated. The Fed also indicated the possibility of 2 more rate cuts next year, a sharp revision from its previous forecast of 4. Now, as a result, the interest rate gap between the U.S. and South Korea have narrowed to 1.5 percentage points. So what does the latest rate hike signal, and how could it impact South Korea's economy? For more on this, we invite Kim Yong-jin, professor at Econ Business School. Welcome, Professor.
Good evening.
And we're also joined by Kim Hwa-gyun, professor of banking and finance at Texas A&M University Mays Business School. Great to have you with us, Professor.
Thank you for the invite.
So let's first begin with Professor Hwa-gyun. The U.S. Federal Open Market Committee decided to cut the policy interest rate by 0.25 percentage points. What is the background for this rate cut, Professor?
So this rate reduction was widely anticipated, with sources like the Fed Watch based on futures data of the Fed, and according to this, predicting about 95% probability of 25 basis point cut, which is correct. And Fed officials also echoed similar sentiments, signaling that the decision was largely expected by the market. And if we look back, the Fed increased the benchmark rate quite rapidly during 2022 to 2023. So the Federal Reserve felt burdened about the speed. And as long as inflation trend is going down, it was expected that the Fed would lower the rate fast. However, as you mentioned, inflation is still hovering above 2%, which is the target rate. And forecasts of the economic activities are stronger and somewhat persistent. So in that sense, the Fed projected that it would adopt a little more cautious approach to lower rates in the coming years than previously expected. I think that's viewed as bad news. Therefore, the stock market collapsed a bit. With this rate cut, obviously, it should be a relief to investors and borrowers. But given that the future directions are going to be much weaker, I think this is somewhat bad news this time.
Right, but we also mentioned about further cuts. Jerome Powell says the pace of rate cuts will slow down next year, and the number of rate cuts initially forecasted to be 4 will be reduced to 2. How would you read into this?
So this assessment is based on both Mr. Powell's statement and also the latest dot plot, which basically illustrates the distribution of opinions among the FOMC committee members regarding future rates. In September 2024, the median Fed funds forecast was about 3%, while the 3.9% actually. But then for the 2027, the longer term prediction for this time in December, projections actually indicate about 3.5%. So initially it was 3%, now actually moved up to 3.5%. So still it is tentative forecast, but clearly it shows that it's not going to go down further. And according to the this gap, it's going to be about twice of the movement instead of like 4. So clearly, we have less room for this decrease in interest rate in 2025 and down the road about like 2027. And this basically is related to the uncertainty the Fed is now facing, because Fed now has to think about where to stop about like this rate reductions. Initially, it started from 2% all the way up to 5.75. And when it goes down, should it be 3% or it should be 4% or 3% or 2%? So initially, most of these economists can have some consensus that it's probably going to be somewhere around like 3%. But because of the uncertainty related to the new government regime, the trade, also, and the capital depreciation changes because of this AI, the investments, some other things. So we don't know that well about like what would be the good neutral rate. And because of that, I think the Fed is now trying to be very cautious about where to stop.
Now, after this news, the South Korean currency has sharply weakened against the U.S. dollar on Thursday, briefly breaching the 1,451 mark for the first time since the 2009 global financial crisis. Professor Yongjin, what is your medium to long-term outlook for the exchange rate?
Well, Professor Hwagyeon says it will be really tough to predict the future in this kind of situation. As you mentioned, the FOMC Korean exchange rate went up over 1450, which looks very dangerous to Korean economy, right? But I think the exchange rate will stay around 1,400 won per dollar. Due to the political instability we have now caused by the impeachment process, as well as the economic downturn in Korea and other countries where Korean countries export. However, in the long run, it will come back to 1,200 won per dollar due to the current amount, account surplus we have and foreign exchange reserves South Korea has. The cumulative current account surplus of South Korea from January to October 2024 is $74.2 billion. The foreign exchange reserve of South Korea as of November 2024 is $415.4 billion. That's huge. I'm very confident that if the current political turmoil be resolved well, following the constitutional process, the exchange rate will come back to normal in the long run. Second half of 2025.
So it could come back to the normal range. But last weekend, reports have also said that the uncertainty in the capital markets is quite easing now following the passage of the impeachment motion against President Yoon Suk-yeol. Now, there are even forecasts suggesting that South Korea's benchmark Kospi could reach 2,600 points by the end of this year. What's your view on this?
Well, it was kind of surprising, right? Korean capital market was not that much volatile. It looks like a stabilized after passage of the impeachment motion against President Yoon Suk-yeol. It is performing better than what we worried. Right? From December 4 to December 17, the Kospi index fell 1.73%, while the Kosdaq index rose 0.53%, which is not significantly volatile, as we expected. The statement of the Financial Services Commission about injecting the Securities Market Stabilization Fund, if needed, also helps ease the concerns of market participants. However, I don't think, that Kospi could reach 2,600 points by the end of the year. It is too much optimistic. There are two reasons. First of all, the political volatility does not end yet, which worries foreign investors. At the moment, foreign investors and individual investors sold off Korean stocks, while National Pension Service and similar pension funds are actively jumping in the situation to acquire the stocks sold by foreign and individual investors. From December 4 to December 17, individuals had sold $1.6 billion worth of stocks in the Kospi and Kosdaq market, while foreign investors had sold $1.1 billion. Foreign investors, has changed its stance to wait and see due to the martial law declaration and try to find alternative investment destinations like Taiwan and China. Secondly, corporate performance won't be good this quarter due to weak demand for semiconductor, automobile, and global economic downturn. Thirdly, the main cause of Korea discount has not been resolved yet. The corporate governance is not very clear enough to make investors feel safe to invest. Even further, the hawkish stand of Federal Reserve Board with regard to the future base interest cut may bring another level of uncertainty to Korean capital market.
Right, so the situation would ease, but 2,600 is too optimistic. All right.
Right.
Now, Professor Hwagin, many are expecting a rate cut at the Bank of Korea's monetary policy meeting in January. How might the current political situation, including the martial law crisis and the impeachment ongoing process, impact monetary policy decisions?
Right. So political uncertainty is widely acknowledged for its tendency to disrupt financial markets, according to many studies using international data. In particular, I think under the current circumstances, in many cases, monetary policy tends to implement some quantitative easing, which I think is already happening by purchasing repurchase agreements, etc. So I think the Bank of Korea is doing right things together with the other financial institute, the government agencies. While I think it remains a bit unclear whether inflation has fully subsided, given that economic forecast is also somewhat low, I think it is probably going to give a stronger case to lower the interest rate. In case of South Korea, however, some actions like this could lead to a significant currency devaluation of the won against the dollar, which is already somewhat soft. So this is somewhat a difficult choice or trade-off that the Bank of Korea actually is facing with. So given the political obscurity now that South Korea is experiencing, although it's probably going to subside within a month or something, it's probably essential to consider this factor carefully, meaning which one's more important? Is it the exchange rate that's going to affect the reputation of the South Korean economy and also the other economic, the variables, or it is going to be still inflation and economic forecast, and you have to give some just judgment about this. So one possibility is maybe you just change the interest rate a little less, actively, but like implement more expansionary fiscal policy, which this is of course the the Treasury's the task. Or maybe you can just actively lower the rate and then try to be calm with the with the fiscal side. So one or the other, I think careful considerations are necessary.
Mm-hmm. And could I ask, what do you think is more likely?
I think interest rate is going to definitely go down by probably 25 BP, and then also they're going to do both. I don't know if it's a good idea to both at this stage, but at this stage, probably just lowering the instability is important. So probably they'll do both.
All right. Thank you for your opinion.
I don't think the BOK will agree to that ideas because think about the current exchange market conditions.
Right.
If we lower, the volatility may increase dramatically.
All right,
Sure.
gentlemen. Thank you so much for both opinions on that front. Now let's shift gears. On the other hand, the current administration's real estate policy faces increasing concerns because it may lose momentum following Yoon's impeachment. Professor Yoongjin, first, what is the current atmosphere in the real estate market?
Well, the real estate market has been frozen due to loan regulations with stress TSR being applied, even before the martial law declaration and impeachment. And also, bipolarization among the real estate market has been going on. The real estate price at Gangnam district in Seoul increased dramatically, but that of other areas fell down, except the first phase New Town redevelopment leading district, that's the long name, including Bundang, Ilsan, Pyeongchon, Cheongdong, and Sambon, which is like a capital area. Right? If uncertainty grows due to the state of emergency and impeachment circumstances, there might be delays in reconstruction schedules in the government announced plan for a sequential reorganization, what they want to do every year, which will lead to further drops in the real estate prices in the short term.
But compared to previous impeachment cases, there are predictions that recovering the real estate market may be a little bit more difficult this time around. How do you see this, and what do you think is the biggest influencing factor in the real estate market next year?
Right. The key difference between 2016 impeachment and the current one is the economic condition. In 2016, when the impeachment of the former President Park Geun-hye occurred, the economic situation was quite good, and the real estate price was not dropped, even though the 3 months, around 3 months, the trade was kind of frozen. But the profit of major corporations in IT and communications were rising, and other economic activities like consumption and employment were solid. So from the day the impeachment bill was passed in the National Assembly, the Kospi index rose by 5.94% over the next 4 months. However, this time we are experiencing economic downturn. In particular, domestic consumption and employment are worsening. Moreover, household debt reached at the highest level, which puts lots of downward pressure on real estate price. In the long run, the delays in the reconstruction schedule may lead to lack of housing supply, which will put upward pressure on the real estate price.
So in line with this, the BOK has revised down its economic growth forecast for this year from 2.4 to 2.2, and for next year from 2.1 to 1.9%. Professor Hwa-kyun, what downward pressures do you expect to affect next year's growth?
Well, for the longer-term trend going downward, I don't really know the Bank of Korea's economic model, but I know most of the models I think the central banks use, and probably this downward trend in the long term has a lot to do with the lower fertility just rate, and also the lower the estimates about the total factor productivity, which has been consistently slowing down. So that's actually why the BOK keeps arguing that we have to have some structural change and reform and things like that. But going back to your question specifically, the next year one, I think why going down, I think is quite related to the economic ambiguity, especially related to the second term of the Trump administration. And also now, I think, although it was happening before, the estimate actually was given before, but I think given this, the political uncertainty now we're facing with in South Korea, that's also the added factor. So clearly, the most important part is this tariff policy, and then all this kind of ambiguities about whether these new administration is strengthening this protectionism about the trade and everything is going to affect the export market. That's basically the main thing. And then I think the added to that, I think, is going to be some other, the political risk and things like that can just push this, the growth rate further down.
Right. As you mentioned, the Trump administration is taking in office next month, and there are growing expectations that there will be significant changes to trade policies, like adjustments to the Inflation Reduction Act. Professor, then what kind of measures are necessary for South Korea?
I mean, this is more like the policy-making issue, so I think it's very important for the government, together with the firms being affected, I think, have to have like task team and then have to start negotiating right now. And I'm sure that we already have some experience with the first regime, and it's going to be even stronger in some sense, especially in the first, part of the second regime of this, the Trump administration. So clearly, it's very important to have good negotiation team in a consistent and persistent matter. I think, have to keep just knocking the door and just keep just, talking and discussing to get to the good conclusions. And of course, in terms of like hedging this type of the international risk is to push the, domestic, the demand. I think the domestic economy, the boosted, I think, is going to be the best solution. So I know it's difficult, but I think it's something that I think the South Korean government can definitely do. So the firms, so I think the domestic side of the hedging is probably going to be something that the government has to really prioritize.
Right. And before we end our discussion, last question. The Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, said Wednesday local time that the U.S. Central Bank has no desire to be involved in any government effort to stockpile large amounts of Bitcoin, which was part of Trump's pledge. Professor Young-jin, this comments by Powell caused Bitcoin prices to drop 5.7%, with other cryptos also losing value. How do you foresee the direction of the crypto market?
Well, that was kind of very disputable. I mean, as a government, they want to stockpile the Bitcoin, which is not yet proven as a instrumental way of doing, some managing, those kind of cryptocurrencies. But I always, have talked people to buy Bitcoin if they want to purchase cryptocurrency, because it has its own, merit compared to other types of coins or tokens. The supply of Bitcoin, I mean, the total number of coin issued is limited to 21 million, and it plays a role as key currency in the world of cryptocurrency. But, a lot of people expected a Christmas rally, but I don't think, that will be true. But the price of the Bitcoin went over $100,000 already, so there might be, a cool down period till the end of this year. But next year, we might see another rally for Bitcoin.
All right, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. We'll leave our discussion right here. Many thanks again to Professor Young-jin and Professor Hwa-kyun for your insights tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도, 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국. 아버지